And this is Real Estate Underground.
Greetings and salutations, Real Estate Undergrounders. This is Ed Matthews, host of the Real Estate Underground. Today is a interesting and very different kind of show. One of the things that I realize when I meet with people who are either thinking about or dreaming about getting into the real estate business, or even, grizzled veterans like me who have been doing it for a while, but they get stuck. They're trying to bust through that next level and they get stuck for some reason. And so, one of the things that we always end up talking about when we have that cup of coffee or share that moment is personal belief, as well as and I mean that from the perspective of believing in yourself, and your mindset and how you create state within your mind, the story you're telling yourself on a very regular basis, which we all do, is so incredibly important to helping us navigate, the challenges that life throws us, and being able to take advantage of opportunities and living out the dreams that we all want to live. And so I have a gentleman here who I've gotten to know over the last, it's probably been 6-8 months, right, John?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, even more, I'd say.
Yeah, it might even be a year
months,
at this
yeah.
point. So
yeah, it's not too far off it.
So we have been going back and forth on Facebook. I can't remember if I reached out to him or he reached out to me, but I'm willing to bet that, given how great he is at follow up and how intent he is on helping me, he probably reached out to me originally. So I'd like to introduce you to John Keane. He's the performance mindset coach. He is based in Hong Kong, but I believe you're Irish by descent, correct?
Yeah.
I detect that accent accurately?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So my ancestors would be proud that I can spot a brogue still. But John, welcome to the show, and thank you very much for your time tonight.
I appreciate it. It's really nice to be able to do this, Ed, and I hope be able to share some stuff that's valuable to your audience, and hopefully that can help them start that process of moving forward with that bit more intent, where they're not being so held back by their limitations and, as you said, that story that we have.
Yeah, I mean, it all comes down to intention, right? Living with purpose and intention is something that, I mean, you and I have talked. I'm a Tony Robbins aficionado, and I've been to several of his events and have gotten a lot out of it, and I've gotten a lot out of our conversations that we've had, in terms of what I want out of life and how I want to take care of my family and take care of myself and the people around me. And it's interesting because I and John, you and I were just talking about this prior to hitting record, that when I talk with real estate, I've affectionately referred to them as the dreamers, the ones that would love to get into this business but just haven't pulled the trigger yet. And the question I ask everyone is, well, what's stopping you, right? And I get the three typical answers, which are, and if you're thinking this, you're not alone, because I thought these things too. I don't know where to find the deals is typically bucket number one. Bucket number two is, I don't have any money, and I certainly don't know where to raise money. How do I do that? Right. That's two. And the third one is, man, I work 60, 80 hours a week. I take care of my mom. I have 4 kids. I have a wife. I have, I like to sleep. And when I'm not working and I'm not hanging out with the kids, I like to go have fun. And, there's just no time. I don't have time. And, invariably, when I ask that question, what's stopping you? And then we dig into one of those 3 reasons, sometimes it's a combination, it always boils down to, almost universally down to, I'm afraid of something. Right. And so, John, you mentioned the story that you tell yourself. And that inner monologue that you have is so important to your ability to move forward in your life. And so I'm going to get out of your way and let you talk about your perspective on that and how you help your clients and students bust through.
Yeah, it's very true. And you mentioned a couple of different typical objections or things that people will use as reasons. And I think time, whether it's money, these are always our natural go-tos
Sure.
for everything, I think, right? It's like it's almost an automated response that we have
Absolutely.
when we want to do something, but there's some limitation holding us back. And like you said, a lot of the time it will be a limiting belief, but typically people won't say that, right? They won't come on and say, oh, I'm scared or I'm afraid, right? So the natural thing is to, oh, it sounds great. And then you usually get the but, and then, you know, it's the time, it's the money, and, you know, as I always try to say to everybody, it's, you know, in terms of time, we all have the same time, right? 168 hours a week. Money, you know, of course, money can be an issue for some people, but again, it's a matter of, you know, how I can become more resourceful in terms of being able to increase my capacity or be able to get more money to do the things I want to do. So it does usually typically boil down back to that story and the limiting beliefs that typically a lot of the time have been formed from a pretty young age. You know, there's a lot of studies around that a lot of our belief system is formed from once, you know, we're 6 years old, and which is hard to think how much of an impact that could have, you know, 30 years later, for example. But it I think influence has such a massive effect, and it's this is something that, you know, came up in one of the recent certifications I did, mindset specialist with Brian DeGrasso. I think he's Canadian, but he could be based in the US, and really talking about how much of an influence has on our mindset, right? Where we grow up, or the people we're around, even culture, these type of things, right? They have such a big difference. Like for me over here, you know, in Hong Kong, where we celebrate Chinese New Year, right? We celebrate that on January 20th compared to, you know, back in normal, right? It's on the 1st of January. So it's two completely different. It's going to have such an impact on terms of, you know, when they set their goals versus when we set their goals. So I think it gets overlooked how important the influence part is. And, you know, we don't have to necessarily challenge it. We just have to accept and be aware of the fact that it does have such an impact. And then this is what typically will create a belief that you have at some stage in your life, where maybe it's, you know, again, it could be a teacher or someone said something to you in school, right? That you're not good at this, or you'll never be good at this. And people hold on to these stories, they hold on to these memories, and then they'll typically get a result because of this belief. And it just reinforces it over and over. So every time we get a result that kind of is in alignment with that belief that we have, which we typically will do a lot, and I suppose you could call it self-sabotage, and it just reinforces it over and over. And then that creates the expectation. Then that expectation then is what we carry into today. And we almost expect that if we try this thing, it's going to fail, right? It's like someone who's trying to lose weight, and maybe they lose a little bit, but they always carry that expectation of, I've tried this in the past, and I typically fall back into the same trap over and over. So it becomes something that they expect. Yeah. And that's really what we need to change, is the expectation, you know, because it's almost that defeated before we even begin, essentially. And, you know, whether it's exercise, nutrition, strategies, I always a great believer that it's, you know, why the mindset is so important is all the strategies are out there, right? Whether it's the strategies for real estate, you know, how to have a successful real estate. Now, I'm not the most familiar with real estate, but I do follow people like Grant Cardone and people like this, right, who will be talking about it. And you can see that the strategies are there to how to begin, or how to take it to the next level, how to get from 6 figures to 7 figures and beyond, or how to lose weight, right? Or how to exercise correctly, or how to have the perfect relationship. But if it was as easy as just the strategy, then I think everyone would be able to do it, right? It's not that simple. It's never just the behavior, it's what's driving the behaviors. And that's typically where people will get stuck, is what's driving the behaviors, is what's happening subconsciously, that narrative that you mentioned that happens over and over. And typically, you know, it'll be the same. You know, we think the same things about 90% of the time as we did the day before. So of course, we keep thinking the same things, we're going to act in the same way, and that's why we typically get the same results, and we just get stuck. So we just end up in that kind of wheel spinning, where people struggle to gain any momentum, or they struggle to break through, even though maybe they're putting in the work, they feel like they're putting in the time, they feel like they're giving it all their energy. But again, it's because of what's going on in the subconscious, that story, until we change that, I really like how, Brian DeGrasso talks about it in his programs. Is it's almost like you got to change upstream for everything to flow downstream. Most people want to fix the downstream stuff, and that's typically what a lot of coaches nowadays will try and fix. The 30 days to lose, 20 pounds, or get your money back, or whatever it is, right? Solving surface level problems instead of really being able to fine tune or rewire essentially what's going on upstream. And when we change the driver, then the behaviors will change, and it'll be consistent and sustainable, compared to you can make initial change from adding discipline and trying to follow a certain protocol, like a workout plan or a diet plan, or kickstart your real estate plan. But typically people, if they don't change what's going on subconsciously, they will continue to fall back into the same pattern and get stuck all over again.
So your program, you talk about rewiring, right? And so, this is the core of what you're talking about, I strongly suspect. So what is that process? How do I'll be perfectly honest. If you've met me in real life, or you happen to be watching us on YouTube, I've got a double chin. I struggle with my weight, right? And I'm not going to ask you to coach. I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask you to coach me right now. But one of the things, we can do that offline. But the thing that, I am curious about is how do you rewire someone? I'm 53 years old. To use a poorly chosen metaphor, that cake is baked, right? So, or is it, right? And so, I'm curious how you look at a human being and evaluate kind of where they are in their journey and where they're trying to get. And, clearly there's a wall there of something that is keeping them from, moving to that next step of happiness, and to use the term behind you, moving beyond greatness, right? So that, they can start to get on the path to health, wealth, good relationships, whatever that thing is for them. How do you do it?
Yeah, it's good that you brought up the example, right? Because it's always good to use stories or to have references. And the main driver a lot of the time is, again, the language, right? The language we use, like you say, I struggle with my weight. So it's, again, it almost reinforces the story, right? That you struggle with your weight, and the more you say it, the more you subconsciously are reinforcing that belief that, oh, he struggles with his weight, right? So then that will typically lead to you, as you said, maybe you will go on a diet, or you will go, change something. And initially that story will continue to be there, that I struggle with my weight. And it typically holds us back. Like people say, I'm big boned. And for me, for example, it would be, I went for a run one day, and I don't run that much. I like to lift a lot of weights, but I'm pretty fit. I play a lot of sport. I'm good stamina, but in terms of my days of being quick and running 10-20K is probably behind me, with at least I think so, right? Again, it's the belief.
Maybe.
I had that belief of, I'm too kind of heavy, or too carrying too much muscle to be able to run, right? So 5K is 10K, and maybe that's why my pace is slow. The next day, and we had this little running group, and I shared my score, my running score, and they were just joking about how slow my time was, and I was making the excuse of, it's because I'm carrying 100 kgs, right? It's different,
right?
But the next day, then I wanted to prove them wrong, of course, so I went out and put the foot to the accelerator, and did it in almost half the time. So again, it was that I was trying to use that limiting belief of, I'm big boned, or I'm, carrying a lot of muscle, right? So I can't run. And that's typically what we do. Like you just mentioned about, the age, or I struggle with weight, right? The language that we use has such a big impact. Some of the clients I work with, for example, won't use names, but it's the story again of maybe going through a divorce, and constantly reinforcing that's the reason why they struggle to get a foothold in their life now. It's that constantly, I'm rebuilding, I'm trying to rebuild my life. And when we use words like rebuild or struggle, the mind will automatically put the word hard before it. So it always typically makes things more difficult, right? And same with even things like work, right? We use the word work, same thing. If we use the word like, I'm trying to build my dream business versus I'm working, there's a big difference in the type of language we use. And like you mentioned, I know you follow Tony Robbins, and he'll talk a lot about that. But there is real power in that language, and that's the first real step is we need to be able to identify what is the language that we're using every day to ourselves. Inner talk, right? The conversations we have with ourselves will be the most important. And also what we're expressing to others. You know, what is it? Are we in a cycle of complaining, or are we in a cycle of comparing to others? And what's, you know, why are we doing these things? And again, typically it'd be fear of failure, fear of success, but it's what is the recurring language that we typically use from when we wake up to when we go to sleep. And when you can start to kind of document it, it typically will be the same all of the time, sometimes even at the same time of the day. For me, you know, when I wake up, I don't know if it's because I come from being asleep or dreaming, but I typically, that's when I'll have like maybe low self-belief. So I'll maybe have self-doubt. Not as much now, still do. But when I first started coaching, I remember waking up and I'd be getting ready to go to work at the time, you know, teaching in a school, or I was vice principal by the time I started coaching, but I'd start to get all that negative, like, what am I doing trying to be a coach? You know, this is a silly idea. Like, no, you know, you need to stop this. And then as the day went on, that changed for me a little bit, and I gained more confidence in what I'm doing. So it's again, that language that it's just almost like autopilot when I wake up, that language starts coming up for me, and you'll start to feel it in different parts of your body. You might even get headaches from it. You might, you know, you'll feel it creates a certain emotional state, as Tony Robbins would talk about. And so it's how we can almost interrupt it quicker. I believe that, you know, they'll always be there. The limiting beliefs, the stories, they'll always be there, right? Because you look at super successful people and they still have them, right? I listened to an interview yesterday.
Got insecurities, right?
Yeah, I listened to an interview yesterday with Alex Hormozy, and I can't think of who he was talking with, Lewis Holmes, I think. But he was talking about his limiting beliefs, right? And how he needs to feel secure, and how he always needs to feel like he's been successful by the number that's in his bank account and the cash flow, right? So like this is a guy that's, you know, doing a lot in terms of his business, and has had a big growth in a short period of time. And he still talks about his limiting beliefs and his struggles, right? So I don't think they ever go away. It's just you become better at being able to interrupt those patterns earlier. So when the language does come up, you can reframe it to something that's more empowering. Like I use the example. Yeah.
So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No.
So is it, you know, when you talk about getting up in the morning, is it talking about, you know, affirmations and, you know, changing the language that way? Or is it more about self-awareness and catching yourself when you say, I struggle? It's I'm working on, or, you know, another way to phrase, and taking, you know, I almost used the word again. You know, I'm working on, you know, the state of my health, for instance, right? And it's a never-ending journey, right? Or something like that, right?
Yes. And that's sometimes, again, where intentions or that type of doesn't always have to be very goal orientated. You can have something that's more of the process driven, like I'm, you know, trying to, whatever it is, sculpt my perfect body, or I'm trying to be the ultimate health, whatever it is for you. And you know, sometimes using that as your baseline to return to when you do find that the language patterns are, or these thoughts are coming up for you. I think it's more so, I think, in identifying and the self-awareness, like that's something that I feel in my own coaching journey, and also with my clients, is the more self-aware we become, the more we see things, right? The better we become at seeing things. And, you know, for anyone who's familiar with NLP and stuff, you become aware of the fact that, you know, the amount of information our subconscious can take in at any given moment, you know, it's like 11 million pieces of information per second, but our conscious mind can only comprehend about 118 chunks, right? So it's like if there was 11 million tennis balls falling from the sky, and you're trying to catch it, and you're going to catch 118 pieces of that information. So that's why it's so important, because the mind will give us the ones that it thinks is most useful to us based off of our past results or expectations or reality. And we start to, you know, filter stuff, we start to delete information, or we generalize, just like when we go to watch a game, you know. You could have 100 guys watching the same game, and everyone has a different version of it because of their version of the reality, right? It's not the actual truth, the actual absolute truth of what's happening.
It's their truth.
So it's their truth. 100%. But in terms of I think affirmations are good in a way that they can, again, get you to change that language. But what is missing from a lot of the affirmation stuff and the manifesting and all of this stuff is the action steps, right? You got to act on it after, right? If you just manifest all day that the future you want and don't take any action towards it, then it's not going to do you much good, right? And it's like the missing chapter from a lot of those books, like The Secret and stuff, right? The action, and that's why you hear people now like Grant Cardone, right? I was talking about massive action. Tony Robbins always talk about massive action, and it's so important. And it's what we do daily to follow up those affirmations, and it's just changing the wording, in your mind. What is a better way to rephrase that statement?
Right.
That's in a positive, right? Because again, our subconscious can't comprehend negatives, right? So if I say, think of a purple elephant, or don't think of a purple elephant, you'll probably think of the purple elephant because he doesn't understand that don't part. So it's again, it's just being more aware of it. And I think that's the big part. The more self-aware you become, the more you understand yourself at your core, behind all the labels of I am a dad, or I am a son, or I am, even my name, all these types of things, right? Who are you behind all of these things? If they were all to be stripped away from you, what would be left, right? Who are you? And the more you can find, the more you can find out that and be in touch with your own spiritual being, I think the easier it becomes at being aware of these patterns and then creating a distance from who you are to the story, right? Because you're not the story. And that's what you really need to be able to do. It's you separate that distance, that this is not you. It's it's something that comes up for you. It's something that you've created in the past, but it doesn't serve you. So what would be a story that would be more serving? And again, it takes time, right? It's not going to just change overnight. But it's about that acceptance, I think, and the awareness is the most important part. You become aware, then you will start to see things differently.
Excellent. And it's interesting because I'll take one of the buckets of the real estate dreamers that I typically, when I was with CT REIA, Connecticut Real Estate Investor Association, I would, someone would walk up to me and say, hey, Ed, I've got a deal, but I have no idea where to find the money. And I'd put an arm around him and I'd turn him around to the group, and the group, is anywhere from 100 people to several hundred people on a given night, right? And I'd say, in this room and I'd count them because I know them all, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, 7, 8, 10 multimillionaires, all of whom invest in other people's deals. And all you need to do is go introduce yourself and make them aware of who you are, become friends with them over time, earn their trust, serve them, they'll serve you. And eventually you'll earn the right to do business with them. And it may take a day, it may take 6 months, but you need to go have those conversations with the human beings that are literally right in front of you. And there's money in this room. So don't tell me you don't know where to raise the money. They're right over there. And the next question is usually, well, who are they? And I said, no, I'm not invading their privacy. You're going to have to go figure that out. But if I were you, I would walk over there. And I point to an area, and then they start to go right. And some of them immediately march over, they act, and they start introducing themselves and figuring out who's who in that area. Some of them go back to their seat. And those are the ones where I walk up and I tap them on the shoulder. I'm like, what are you doing? And what do you mean? I said, you asked me to solve a problem for you, help you raise money. And I pointed over to where the human beings are that will gladly help you with that. And, and then you went back to your seat. So how come? What's stopping you, man? And, I get another excuse. Well, we're about to start up again. So what? Go hand them your card. Go talk to them. Ask them for time after the event, right? And, and what I think I'm doing for them is creating accountability. Right. If you tell me you want to do something and I help you and say, okay, here are the 1, 3, 5, 20 different things you can do to take massive action to solve the question that you just asked me, then you have to act. Right. But, the other part of it is, and what helps me is like when I decided, I just had a bit of a health scare, and nothing serious. I'm fine. But the fact is that, part of my plan coming out of that experience is not only am I going to act, but I'm also going to have someone there that's checking me, right? And making sure that I'm doing what I said I was going to do. And the way I did that was I created a partnership with a friend of mine who is also, looking to get in, get their health back, in looking to get in better shape. And so, we live pretty far away from one another, but we're reporting back to one another. Here's what I did today. 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 And, it's a simple text, right? It's not even a phone conversation. So there's literally no excuse for me to not text her and her not to text me. And, it's, I had a good day and this is what I did, or I stubbed my toe but I'm getting right back on it. And then I'm, going back and forth, and we're going back and forth and encouraging each other and saying, that one issue doesn't define the journey. Get right back on path and keep going. Right. And so, having that accountability partner for me is something that I need, because I'm really good at rationalizing the 19 reasons why I shouldn't go to the gym when I'm tired. Right. Or the 14 reasons why I really want to have, that whatever for lunch, when I know I should have a salad, but for whatever reason, I want that turkey sandwich with white bread and blah, 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 blah. And I know I shouldn't do it. Right. Most times I don't. Every once in a while I do. And so, that's when having that accountability partner helps, because I'm clearly willing to lie to myself, but I'm not willing to lie to my friend. Right. And so that's another piece of this. I feel like it's I know you've got a strong opinion on this, so I'll let you comment.
Yeah, I think accountability is super important. And again, I know I mentioned it a few times, but I love how Alex Hormozy always uses it in terms of, if you got a kid and you tell them to brush, they need to brush their teeth in the morning or in the evening, and they don't want to do it, you got to keep telling them to do it over and over, until, eventually that external motivation becomes an internal habit, right? Where we just do it, or your kid will start to do it by themselves when they get to a certain age, or putting on the seatbelt when they get in the car, right? You might need to keep reminding them. Eventually you get to a stage where you're not going to have to remind them anymore.
Right.
And yeah, that's accountability. Excuse me. Accountability is super important. It's, a lot of what I do with my guys, whether it is those who, people can be in the programs for different reasons. But again, there's a lot of patterns for what is keeping everybody stuck, whether it is, the excuses around exercise or not exercising, or diet, or not having enough time to spend with their family outside of their business, which can be a super common one as well. But it's, that's what you've got to be there to keep them accountable for. And, we do set different, we call it like Momentum Mondays. What's the things we need to do, and then checking in again later in the week, and checking in again on the end of the week to see what we've done, what we haven't done. And it is super important. It is super important, because the same excuses will continue to reappear over and over, right? The areas we do self-sabotage are the areas that keep us stuck, especially I think for people around exercise, nutrition. It can be a big one, right? And like we talked about earlier, it is all in the mindset, because there's 110 different diets you can do that will help you lose weight. And we all know what we should eat, what we shouldn't eat. It's not like we don't have the information. It's all out there. It's free. You can Google anything now. And same with exercise, right? It's the same. Like, I'm a personal trainer as well. Now, I don't really use it in a sense of, I don't go train people on personal training, because I don't really necessarily feel that a lot of the time it's not what they need, right? It's they don't need me to show them how to do the exercises. That can be helpful, of course, having the proper form, but it's the motivation to want to go to the gym, or it's the motivation to be able to do it over and over again, right? It's not the actual behavior itself. And that's why, I see some people, they have trainers and then they can't go to the gym without their trainer, and even though they know, right, they know what they need to do. It's why can't you have that external motivation, as Alex Hormozy says as well. He talks about, like, do you feel like, what's your favorite TV show? And he uses the reference of Game of Thrones, and he's like, oh, do you feel like do you need to motivate yourself to sit down and watch Game of Thrones? Like, is it a difficult thing to do? They're like, no, of course not. And he's like, yeah, well, that's what you need to do with how you need to change, how you see things like your exercise, and how you see things like your fitness. And again, it's around the language that we use, right? that when we talk about these things.
Right.
You know, if we use certain words, like I talked to a guy recently, he was actually in real estate, and he talked about struggling working at home, and he was using things like, you know, this stupid desk, like the language that he was using, you know, I'm sitting at this stupid desk, and you know, it was almost as if the desk was the issue, right? Or but then when he had the realization of, I actually had my most successful period sitting at this stupid desk, right? In real estate, because he missed the environment of being in the hustle and bustle of maybe an office, and he needed that maybe external motivation rather than being able to internally motivate himself to how can I motivate myself to be able to perform where I'm at and enjoy doing it. So, and you know, when I talked about the language and changing the language, but a big thing that you need to do then is you need to start writing down or messaging people or saying voice notes of the things that are working well, the wins, right? When you do decide, oh, I didn't have that turkey sandwich today, right? You got to really train that into your mind, because that's showing the progress. And that's what we need to give our subconscious. You know, it likes clear directions. So when a lot of people make changes and they don't acknowledge them, and it doesn't, you know, it's not changing the narrative that's going on up in the subconscious. So you need to be in the habit of all of your wins, whether they're big, small, you know. And we do it on our start of our calls every week. You know, what's your wins for this week? And sometimes people say, oh, I didn't have any wins this week. It's like, if you had some wins, what would they be? Right. And they're just getting a little bit deeper, and there is wins, right? And they try to play them down. They say, oh, but it's just a small one. It's not really a win. And again, it's that story, right? Almost trying to pull them back. When they're making changes, they don't even want to acknowledge that they've made the changes. So it's like, it's not.
Isn't that what it's all about, right? It's the incrementalism. It's the 1% change on a regular basis that gets you to that ultimate goal, right?
Yes. Simon Sinek says it very well in one of his interviews. There's no, you know, you brush your teeth, for example, there's no one day that you brush it that makes your teeth white and healthy, right? It's you do that every day over a period of your life. You don't got to go to the dentist as frequently as the one who doesn't, or the same with the gym, right? There's no one workout. You come out, you lift up your top, and you're like, wow, I'm shredded. You know, that was fantastic. I've done it now. It's doing the 30. It's doing it 30 minutes a day, maybe 5 days a week, 4 days, whatever works for you, over a 6-month period, right? That's where you get the results. Is the consistency and the small changes, right? You don't even really feel it, right? You don't feel the change as such. You know, sometimes people say to me, oh, you know, you got more muscles or than the last time I seen you. And for me, I just look the same as I probably have for the last 5 years. But even though the scales will say differently, but we just don't notice the changes, right? Because they're so small, but it's consistent. Yeah, it's very gradual, but it's consistency. That's what gets it, right? And people don't get to that consistent part typically because the story hasn't changed for them internally. So they change the behavior, but it's just like a short-term fix, right? The fad diets or the, you know, these special workouts that's going to help you to, you know, do 75 days of something consistently or whatever it is. And then, you know, they just go back to the same pattern, right? Or they give it up for 75 days and then they go back to the same pattern. So it's how can we create something that's more sustainable, that we can actually progress over our life and just keep consistent, right? I work out probably the same every day almost as I have for almost probably the last 8 or 9 years, right? It hasn't changed much. It's just consistent. I eat the same foods pretty much for the last 8 or 9 years consistently. People would slag me. It's when I used to work back at the time at lunch, especially here in Hong Kong, they like their food. And I'd come into work with my chicken and broccoli and they'd be like, it's so boring. You know, you don't even have any sauce on it. Like what, you know, it's just, that's my routine. It's your ritual, serving a greater purpose. Yeah. It's a part of a strategy for a longer term plan, right? It's not in the moment decisions of, oh, of course I want that juicy chasu, as they call it over here, like fried pork, the different stuff that they have that's really nice, which I do have every now and again. I have cheat meals. I'll have days where I allow myself. And I think that's important as well. As you don't have to be so rigid that you cannot enjoy something every now and again. You know, I like the 80-20 rule for everything, right? 80% of the time, if you're consistent 80% of the time, your workouts, your nutrition, your business, and 20% of the time you're relaxing, you're with family, whatever it is, you're enjoying some meals, it's going to be pretty consistent, right? So 80 over the week would be maybe like 5 days of eating healthy, 6 days of eating healthy. And you do that consistently for 6 months, you will get results.
Yep, indeed. So John, I'm curious, when you are not coaching and when you're not helping people become their best selves, right? Helping them evolve into their ultimate, being the ultimate, as you were saying, the ultimate father, the ultimate husband, the ultimate family member, the ultimate, having the health that you always dreamed about, having the wealth you've always dreamed about, or the freedom or whatever, right? So when you're not doing that, what do you like to do for fun? Let's talk about the 20%.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I do stuff for fun for sure, but I'm definitely a massive advocate of my own growth, right?
Yep.
So I'm always doing my own programs or working with coaches or trying to upskill, because again, I always feel you need to be more, right? To have more, and to do more, to have more, right? Eventually,
Right.
but the being comes first. And a lot of people don't want to have that being part, right? They just want to have more. It's like, I want to have the real estate success, or I want to have, like, what Grant Cardone has, or what other people in real estate have, or in any industry, right? But they don't want to do the being part that is involved in getting there. So for me, improving my own self-awareness, upskilling my own coaching skills. Like, I do a lot of different things. I've done sleep programs, I've done, as I say, personal training, NLP. I try to come at it from a lot of different angles, so I have different tools to support these people, not just them, but also myself, because my own growth, I need to evolve into a certain level to get to the next level. So I'm not necessarily chasing the strategies, I'm chasing the being part of it that's going to help elevate me to that. But in terms of outside of my personal growth, I like to play sports. I'm a big advocate of watching sports. I think, again, you don't need to focus on being productive 100% of the time. And I think that, again, gets a lot of people, they feel they can't watch an Netflix show, or they can, or you're almost termed as being lazy in some parts of social media, right? If you prioritize your sleep, you're lazy all of a sudden, which is complete opposite. It's, in fact, it's almost self-sabotaging if you don't prioritize your sleep, because that's where you recover, and that's where all the workouts, the nutrition, all the stuff starts to come together for you. But of course, I do stuff with my lovely wife here in Hong Kong, in my downtime. Now, again, I should probably do more. You get sucked into, like everyone does, of trying to be productive all the time and trying to improve, and sometimes forgetting to just enjoy the present moment. So we do things like hiking. I'm not the most sociable person. So sport has always been an area where I do socialize. I like to play football, as you call it, soccer in the States. That's always been a big passion of mine. In terms of watching sport, I like pretty much every sport, especially soccer. Manchester United has always been in my blood growing up. Different sport, rugby, most sports, snooker. I'm always open to different types of sport, golf. So sporting, I suppose, and then downtime with my wife or friends. Again, I don't think you need a big circle of friends. I'm not, because again, it can be time, right? If you've got 100 different people you need to attend to, then it's going to take a lot of your time. So can you have a small circle of people that you can rely on, that are in the similar mindset as you, and that can also take you away from that mindset of business and mindset of performance, right? Because you can become obsessed with that. And I see people in that mode where they don't have the ability to switch off. And I think you need to be able to do that. You need to be able to say, it's okay if I don't work out today, because I know I've got this, right? Moving forward, I can change. I don't need to be on a 100-day streak of working out. If I break it, everything falls apart. It's, I have the control to know that if I travel, I can enjoy some food that I don't typically eat. And if I gain a couple of pounds, I know I'm going to lose it, because I've done it over and over. I know what I need to do to change it, right? So you have to have that self-belief in yourself too. But yeah, in downtime, for me, it'd be sports, personal development, doing things with my wife here, sometimes hiking. But yeah, I'm a pretty simple guy. I like to keep it simple. I like to be close to being able to, like, have access to my work stuff if I need to. And I typically space my stuff out over the day. I work with a lot of clients in the States. So this time in the morning for me is usually a time where I'd have calls, but I'd also have calls late in the evening. So during the day could be where I have a little bit of downtime. Maybe I go to the pool and stuff when the weather is good, the gym. So I have a pretty structured routine. It's pretty much the same all the time. It doesn't change much. And that's, again, an area where I have a weakness, where I do need to have a bit more variety and get out of my comfort zone and do different things. So again, it's all about that awareness of it. But I do think, 20% of the time you do need to sit down, watch your favorite show. You don't need to take that out of your life. There's ways of fitting it in. It's just when you've earned it. Joe Rogan always talked about that, is he will sit down, watch his movies or Netflix shows, but when he's earned it, right? When he's put in what he's done, he needed to do for the day. and then he will sit down and enjoy it, right?
Right. That's excellent. So John, first off, I'm fortunate to call you a friend, and I've really enjoyed getting to know you over the last I guess it's been a year, and I do have a lot of admiration and respect for your approach and how you help people, and frankly, I'm in all. You've been kind enough to let me in all your groups, so I get to see the actual results of the people that you're coaching. And it is really impressive. I mean, you're actually changing lives for the better, and you're doing it on a grand scale. There are thousands of people out there that follow you, and I'm lucky and fortunate to call you a friend, and I'm grateful for you coming on the show. One last thing, let me ask you. So if people want to learn more about you or your coaching program, or they just want to get to know you, what's the best way to track John Keane down and become his friend?
I think probably Facebook is probably where I'm most active. I have a group. It's called Performance Mindset School, I think is what the name of the Facebook group is.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a pretty active group. I put stuff in there most days, trainings, different stuff for people to utilize, and they can see some of the work that we've done inside of there, or even just following my page, my Facebook page. I put up content most days, and again, it's most of the time it's content that will help people that they can actually implement. It's not necessarily me showing pictures of flashy cars or things that don't actually help anybody, right? Which you can see a lot of on social media, my private plane, but what does that do for me? It doesn't really do much, right? So I try and share stuff that can help people, and also showing testimonials of other people, because that can be the confidence for somebody to take action, right? It's seeing someone else doing it, and that's how you almost can break limiting beliefs. Is you either have to get results yourself and prove that your limiting beliefs are wrong, or else if someone else has done it, if you see you want to be in real estate and that guy's done it, right? So why can't I do it, right? If it's possible, it's not necessarily what you think is possible for you, it's what's actually possible. If someone else has done it, that means it's possible, right?
Yes.
You think what's possible for you is only based off of the story and that expectation, like we mentioned, right? Where you think you're possible of and what you think the world is. But it's not necessarily that. And I think when people can detach from that and actually see what's really possible in their industry or in their thing that they want to excel in, then that is when they can start to break through the limitations and change the narrative, is what's actually possible, not just what's been possible for me. And if you get results in it, then of course that's going to reinforce it more. But you have to be able to, again, acknowledge the results, right? When you do lose the weight, or when you do go to the gym, and if you had the idea in your mind, there's a 6-second gap almost between our subconscious our subconscious wanting us to do something and us consciously acting on it, right? So we have that 6 seconds, and that's typically where we might make that quick decision of, I don't want to do it today, right? The gym or the workout. But if you find yourself feeling that and you still go work out, that's a big win, right? So you have to really reinforce that story, because you didn't act when you had a trigger or something in that split second, right? Because it's all about split second decisions, whether you're in the grocery store, whether you walk down that aisle, whether you stop at that thing on the way home, it all happens in a split second, in a moment. And I always like to link those moments to almost like sport. Sport as well happens in moments a lot of the time, right? Everybody is at a certain level a lot of the time. There's not much difference in terms of talent, but games are won in moments a lot of the time, special moment from a special player. And it's almost the same with your choices and decisions, right? They happen instantly, and it's the quicker and the more aware we can be of them, then the more in control we will be.
Yeah. Well, John, thank you very much for your time tonight and your wisdom. And I congratulate you on your success and for all the thousands of people that you've helped. And again, thank you for your friendship. And it's good to see you, my friend.
No problem. I appreciate it, Ed.
All right. Be well.
You too.